Basically, we provide technology, structure, and services to all 21 university libraries in Ontario. I'm sure most of you have used our services or even talked to us and said, please improve your services. We're pretty much 10 technical staff. That includes our systems admins and programmers. And then we have 10 librarians who you probably contact. And our project manager is Alan Darnell. And that's a picture of our lovely
Crew.
I guess, yeah, crew, who is decked out in custom Odyssey gear, by the way. And I'm sure some of you might recognize Eric. He's no longer with us, but I decided to add that picture. And Bartek, who's in that picture, by the way, is hiding at the back. These are some of the services that we offer. Racer, which is pretty much interlibrary loan system. RefWorks, citation management tool. I'm sure a lot of you have used RefWorks. And Journals, which is what we first started with. It's grown to over 20 million articles, and it's growing every day. Our ebooks project, which has over 360,000 books in electronic format, which also means it's a scanned print books. Also, we have XML books that we introduced a few months ago. Odyssey is a search platform so that you can search statistical data, and SFX is a link resolver service. So some of the work that we're doing, we've been working on a geoportal service. Actually, Saperi, he is the lead programmer for the geoportal service. You can pretty much search geospatial data and get it to map onto, and say you want a section, like data in a section of the map. You can pretty much draw a bounding box and it'll bring you back data from it. We had a demo, I think it might not work. Yeah, it's not working properly. It was like an internal tool that we set up. If you guys want to see the demo afterwards, just please come to one of us or go to Saperi and we'll be happy to show you. It's an internal tool right now. We'll be releasing it soon, I think, for the librarians to try it out, so we know what to improve. We also want to come up with the integrated search API. So we have so many services, but the books is in Solar, and our journals and Odyssey, they're on a MarkLogic platform. So what we want to do is just allow any users who want to integrate our services with their own platform to be able to just send in a query and give you back a bunch of results from all our services so that you can use it to get more users to use our services. We have an API for journals, which is using OpenSearch 1.1. It's really old. You can't do much. You can't get back facets. It's pretty much just sending in a very basic query, and I'll return you the records that we have. So we really want to improve on that. Some of you might have seen what we had. If you have any feedback on it, please feel free to send it our way. And we also want to work on mobile versions of some of our services that we have. We have an e-journal service. If you want to go to it, it's journals.scholarsportal.info. Just type it on one of your phones, and you can see what we have. If you have feedback on that, would really like to know what you think of it, so we can improve it. And when we work on our books mobile version, we know what users expect and what they want. Okay, next. So Majid is going to talk about some of the neat stuff that we've done with books and user accounts.
Hi. So essentially I'm going to talk about what we did recently with the books platform. Especially it was a project that was hoped to add some features to books, but the hope to kind of extend it to other projects that we have. So the idea was to kind of give users more personalized experience on the platform, especially when you're reading a book. You usually like to bookmark things, highlight things, and you want to keep those bookmarks and highlights. So the idea was to have a user account. The user can add those bookmarks and kind of create their own personal library if they want to. had two main design objectives. So we didn't want the user to come into our platform and have to create a new account. Kind of who wants a new username, password? We have enough of those. And also we wanted to kind of, because we have two kind of different type of content, like restricted content, which are the ones that are subscribed by schools and are only available to the students, and the ones that are like public content, which are the internal archive scan content. So we wanted to, if there's a student, they come from school, we wanted to let them access the restricted content. So the idea was to use what the shibboleth, which is, I will talk about it more. This is kind of like a way of us to authenticate the students. And then if somebody's coming from outside this student, a school, they can just use one of their Gmail, Facebook, and any OpenID account that they have. And we use a service called RPX for that. I will expand on those later. The other goal was to kind of build this authentication system now for ebooks, and then later maybe expand this functionality to be used with other services. I will show you now how we kind of put together our systems to first to kind of meet the second goal, and then I will expand on the first two subjects. So the idea is to kind of have like a dedicated authentication machine. So when a user wants to access this restricted resource, they'll be sent to this authentication machine. And then based on what they choose, the authentication method, the authentication process will be handed off to either the school shibboleth system or, for example, your Gmail account. I can show you the login page here. So essentially, this is the login page that they see. There's two options. I mean, they can use their school account, or they can use one of the accounts that we allow here. We can expand these, of course. So based on which option they choose, the authentication process will be handed off to RPX or the shibboleth system. So after they authenticate, by whichever method, they come back, they will be sent back to our authentication system, which is like my.scholarsportal.info. What it does at this point is to ensure that the authentication has been done properly, and then retrieve the profile. This is the first step, which is different for RPX and shibboleth. The rest of the steps are the same for both authentication mechanisms. We essentially just create the user account if it doesn't exist, and then kind of create like a security session, which is meaningful only on the authentication system. And we create this domain-wide cookie. We essentially create a cookie for the sp.info domain, so that if they go to the other services, that's the way that our services know that this user has been authenticated. And then it will redirect it to the target application, which, I mean, right now it's only ebooks, but I mean, we have a working demo for journals. So they will be sent to the application. On the application side, the way we know that user is authenticated is to check the cookie. The cookie has the session ID. And they can use that, the application uses that session ID to access to the session information, which includes the identifier of the user. So the cookie only has information about, hey, this is a session, and this is the ID of that session. From that cookie, you cannot get access to the user info if you are somebody else outside the Scholars Portal, but our services can access the REST API that we have built on top of the MySP info to get like other info about the user. What's the identifier of that user? What's the user ID? What are the user profile information? And they have like a different session on each application. So it's kind of, this is just to decouple these two sessions. So, and then these two machines communicate. So maybe I can show you just how it looks like from here. then it will send me back to mine, and then it will send it back to source portal, and then kind of, if I could show you. Yeah, this is the kind of cookie that we put. So the domain is scores.info, so it's accessible by all of our services. And you see the content is just like an identifier. From that point, they can contact the authentication service and access the cookie, access the rest of the profile. So let me give you an introduction to Shibboleth. So this is essentially like a project by the internet too. It's started, I guess, in US, and the idea was to kind of provide like a single sign-on service and kind of attribute-based authorization. Here in Canada, there is one federation, Canadian Access Federation, that provides kind of all the schools and service providers that want to use the single sign-on will have to join that Access Federation. We joined it as a service provider, of course. So the idea is that you have the browser, which is the user agent. There's a service provider, as Course Portal is one, for example, and there's identity provider, which are school. I will show you what's the interaction like in the next slide here. So a user goes to a service provider, tries to access a restricted resource. What happens is that the service provider sends a redirects the user to the IDP, and it sends like an authentication request. It's like a signed authentication request from the service provider. Both service provider and identity provider, because they are part of the federation, they have the public key of the other end. So the user will be sent to the identity provider, which was the Toronto in the demo that I showed you. And then it will ask me, usually using a form-based authentication or any other method that they have, they authenticate the user, and then they redirect user back to the service provider. This time the redirect is like a post redirect, so it contains a lot more in the body of the HTTP redirect, which is essentially a signed response that, hey, this is the user that he claims to be, and these are some of the attributes. There are other ways that service provider and IDP, they can communicate using a back channel, kind of get extra attributes, which we don't use at the moment. But we kind of get some attributes that they provide to us. And then I showed you the rest of the steps we take. So we asked the IDPs, which are the schools, to provide us with the most important attribute is the persistent ID. So every time the user comes back, they give us the same ID. And I mean, that's the idea, so that they can access their own their resources again and again. We ask them to give us email, affiliation, and the common name. Kind of these are, we could build more services on those. None of the school agreed to kind of give it to us, even though we kind of encourage them, but apparently like there's so much privacy stuff that's so hard to navigate. So let me give you also an overview about the RPX. So we wanted to give other people who are not necessarily from a school access to our internet archive data. And the idea was kind of, as you saw here, so if I just log out here, go back to my login page, so I can use any of these accounts here. But most is provider not necessarily exactly the same name. So it would be, I mean, you could integrate with Twitter. It's not very hard. You could integrate with Google. It's not very hard. But the thing is that to maintain this, to keep up with the changes of the API that they provide, and to do this for all these providers is kind of like a hassle that we didn't want to do. So there is this service called RPX. It's pretty cheap for what it does. So it takes care of interfacing with all these providers, and it gives you like a really large list of providers that it supports, like 20, like I don't know, LinkedIn. Who wants to use LinkedIn? But whatever. And it just does that for you, and then it gives you like a generic API to gives you the profile like very nicely, so you don't have to maintain this adapter layer. It does it for you. So it's very simple. Your browser sends the user, like shows the user this widget, which is you can configure, and then based on what you choose, the user will be sent to the provider of that account, which is Google or Yahoo. And then after the authentication is done, instead of directly sending it back to you, the authentication, the user is redirected to the RPX server. That's where the magic happens. The RPX server goes back to each of these providers and asks for profile attributes that you can configure which profile attributes and kind of populates profile, and then it will send it back to the address that you want, which in our case would be our authentication machine. And in that redirect, there is a token. So then we can use that token to go back to RPX server, get back more information about the user, whatever profile information they have provided. And that's from that point, the rest is the same as she was. So this is the process I talked about. Kind of you have to have an API key, which is fine, and then this is kind of like a sample of JSON that will return. So you kind of send a query to RPX URL and pass it the token that you receive, and then it will give you, hey, this is the user Google from Google, his email is like that, and so on.
So I just have a quick question. This is something that you're licensing from, and this RPX.
Yeah.
Is that licensed just for your organization, or are you licensed for OCL? So, for example, would our institution be able to make use of the same sort of service?
The license as Scholars Portal with RPX?
Is it for Scholars Portal? Is it for your office, or is it like for all the people who subscribe to Scholars?
That's the thing. I'm not really sure. When we signed up, we just said we're from Scholars Portal, but if some
You think they
other
would check?
address sends in,
Do you think they would check?
They have a list of, you can, no, the thing is that I can authorize various domains to include this widget.
Okay.
I think there is a limit on how many domains I can have.
Okay.
I mean, for example, I had the OCL domain and also all the proxy domains for libraries, because proxies are kind of, they have their own domain. You have to add them. But I think there is a limit, but I think there is like the license fees. I think we are using the very basic fee set, which is $100 a year. So it's pretty cheap.
So
It's pretty,
I think we could scrape that.
yeah, and then I mean, this basic license doesn't allow me to kind of customize the widget, but I think you go to the next layer and then you can customize the widget, which is probably what we're gonna do. Okay, so that's it for authentication. Let me do it with Google as well. So I just, it shows me to take me to Google. That's kind of, it's Yahoo. It will take me to Yahoo. So. So I go to my library here. kind of release this to librarians, whileback go, now it's public. So the next thing I want to show you is this little thing you see here. So it's how we integrated with reference. So we had this simple widget that kind of you could add something to your reference library, but this is a more advanced way of integrating with reference. So I can kind of show all my references in our own interface. I could kind of go to reference and choose like citation format. I could select all of this, check the bibliography, kind of. And as I will show you, it's not hard at all to do. So let's get to it. So this whole thing is done using the reference API. It's what they call REST format. I'm not sure what that means, but it's essentially just from the REST perspective, it's over HTTP. It doesn't do anything REST-like. It's just very simple. You use HTTP to get that, and the result is in XML. So by REST, that's what they mean, I guess. So they have different classes they kind of replicate, if you have used RefWorks user interface, they try to replicate whatever functionality they have in that interface in this API. We didn't try to replicate that whole experience. I mean, if they want to use RefWorks, they go to RefWorks. But it kind of, like the basics we can provide to make it easier for them to interact with their RefWorks from eBooks. So what we used was authentication folders, kind of output the slides, reference, and retrieve. That's kind of the retrieve. And it has like save search, my list, manuscripts. I mean, you could expand a whole lot on things that they provide. So the way we do it, we have this on the back end. There is like a controller that's kind of listening. We're sending requests, kind of our own request to that controller, and it goes back to the reference installation and makes this call. And there is this very nice, if you have been doing web development with Java, you probably have heard of a Spring framework. We're using that for a project, and it has a really nice REST template support that kind of takes care of calling to a third-party REST API, making calls to third-party REST API. That helps a lot, makes life easier. And they have a pretty good, also show you like the documentation that I have. It's pretty good. It's not stellar, but it's you can work with it. So kind of that backend has, or kind of you have to have an access ID key, which is configured for that backend. So an example will be when I'm getting list of folders, I just send a request to my own backend called, say, reference, give me the folders. That backend kind of have the session ID that I have already opened and translate this to the REST API to the refworks. The refwork service gives us XML. I translate it to JSON, and if there is like sometimes they return HTTP error codes, and I kind of translate it to my own user-friendly error messages and return like a JSON. Kind of show you. Yeah, so kind of get folder, come on. just a quick set of lessons that we learned. With that single, the idea of shibboleth was kind of to provide with single sign-on, but it doesn't do single sign-on really well. So you can sign up from your own service provider, and you can ask the identity provider to please sign me out. But since it's a very complex issue because the user could be logged into other service providers, so it's a very complex, apparently it's a very complex issue to solve. So essentially, identity provider do not sign you out because you cannot guarantee that the user is signed out. So kind of the user has to close the browser old-fashioned way to get signed out. Proxies are not very helpful. They rewrite the URLs and the identity for IDPs are kind of URL format, even though it's not a real URL. It kind of messes things up. You have to go around that. And then when you go around that, they also do not like the cookie that we set, because the cookie that we set is for score.info, but they kind of have their own subdomain. Like when you go to a proxy, it will generate the complete. So our whole solution doesn't work there for now. What things that was really helpful, because we have to coordinate with all these schools, and these are like system people. What they really liked was that we kind of created this test page for them to kind of give them, hey, just go to this page and test, and it will show you all the attributes of your response. And it was very helpful for them to kind of integrate with your system. That was really helpful. As I said, because of the privacy, they don't give us anything other than the identifier. And HTML5 styles are easy to make. That's it. I will be happy to answer any questions.